There are moments in life when everything changes, when the person you've always been suddenly isn't enough anymore, and you have to decide who you're going to become. This is a story about one of those moments. This is the story of David Vijaya, a man who had every reason to stay invisible, but chose instead to become unforgettable. Imagine living every single day of your life being treated like you don't matter, not because of anything you did, not because of who you are as a person, but simply because of where you came from. That was David's reality. In the community where he lived, your family name determined everything: your worth, your opportunities, your future, and David's family, well, let's just say they weren't exactly on the list of people who mattered. David knew what it felt like to walk into a room and watch conversations stop. He knew the sting of being excluded from gatherings, the humiliation of being talked about like he wasn't even there. People didn't try to hide their disdain. They looked right through him, as if he was made of glass, as if he was nothing. But here's the thing about being treated like nothing for long enough: it either breaks you completely or it builds something inside you that can't be broken. For David, it was the latter. Every insult, every dismissive look, every cruel word became another brick in the wall of determination he was building inside himself. He just needed one thing, one reason big enough, important enough, to finally let that wall come crashing down and show everyone what he was really made of. That reason came in the most unexpected way. One ordinary day, David saw her, a young woman whose face stopped him dead in his tracks. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, it was something deeper, something that reached into the most protected corner of his heart and pulled out memories he'd tried so hard to preserve. She looked exactly like his mother. His mother had been the one person who believed in him unconditionally, the one person who saw value in him when the whole world insisted he had none. She had passed away years ago, leaving David alone in a world that already didn't want him. The grief had never fully healed. And now, standing before him, was someone who brought all of that flooding back. The resemblance was uncanny. The same gentle eyes, the same soft smile, even the way she carried herself. But fate has a cruel sense of humor sometimes, because this girl, this person who reminded him so much of the one he'd lost, was in terrible danger. She was trapped in a situation that was spiraling out of control, surrounded by people who saw her not as a human being, but as a means to an end. And at the center of all this darkness was one name that everyone whispered with a mixture of fear and respect: Fairy. Ferry wasn't just powerful, he was power itself. He was running for leader in the upcoming election, and everyone knew he was going to win. Not because people loved him, but because people feared what would happen if they didn't support him. Ferry had connections that reached into every corner of their society. He had money, influence, and most importantly, he had the backing of people who could make your life very difficult if you crossed them. David had always known about Ferry. Everyone did. Ferry was the kind of person you avoided, the kind of person you didn't challenge unless you had a death wish. Going up against Ferry was like trying to stop a hurricane with your bare hands. It was suicide. But when David looked into the eyes of that girl, when he saw the fear and the desperation there, something inside him snapped. Or maybe it finally clicked into place. All those years of being pushed down, of being told he was worthless, of accepting a life in the shadows. Suddenly, none of it mattered. What mattered was that someone needed help, and nobody else was going to give it to her. So David did something that shocked absolutely everyone. He announced his candidacy for leader. He was going to run against Ferry in the election. The news spread like wildfire through the community. People couldn't believe it. David Vijaya, The same David who'd been a social outcast his entire life? The same David who had no money, no connections, no support? He was going to challenge Ferry? The reactions ranged from disbelief to outright laughter. People thought it was a joke. Some thought he'd lost his mind. Even the few people who cared about David tried to talk him out of it. They told him he was being reckless, that this wasn't bravery, it was foolishness. But David had made his decision, and for the first time in his life, he felt absolutely certain about something. What David didn't fully understand yet was just how deep the corruption ran. Within days of his announcement, people started approaching him, not supporters, not well-wishers. These were messengers, delivering warnings wrapped in politeness but carrying unmistakable threats. They all said variations of the same thing. You need to understand who really runs things around here. You need to know about the chairman. The chairman, even the name sent chills down people's spines. Nobody knew exactly who he was. Some said he was a businessman with unlimited resources. Others said he was a politician who'd been pulling strings for decades. A few whispered that he wasn't even one person, but a council of the most powerful people in the region. But everyone agreed on one thing: the chairman controlled everything: elections, already decided policies, already written leadership positions, already assigned. Ferry wasn't actually in charge of his own campaign. He was just the face that the chairman had chosen to put forward. And now David, poor foolish David, was threatening to disrupt a system that had been carefully constructed over years. The message to David was crystal clear: if you continue this path, you're on your own. Nobody will protect you, nobody will help you. And even if, by some miracle, you actually win this election, it won't matter. The chairman will make sure you never actually hold any real power. You'll be destroyed, politically and possibly literally. This is your last warning. For the first time since making his decision, David felt genuine fear. Not the fear of losing. He'd been losing his whole life. This was different. This was the fear of understanding just how big the monster he was fighting really was. This wasn't just about beating Ferry in an election. This was about taking on an entire corrupt system that had been operating in the shadows for who knows how long. He spent a sleepless night staring at the ceiling, questioning everything. Was he being brave or just stupid? Was he helping that girl or just getting both of them killed? Did he really have any chance at all, or was he just making a symbolic gesture that would be forgotten as soon as he was crushed? But then, in the early morning light, something shifted. He thought about that girl again. He thought about his mother and how she'd always told him that doing the right thing wasn't supposed to be easy. He thought about every person who'd ever made him feel small, who'd ever looked at him like he was trash, and he realized something important: he'd already lost everything that fear could take from him. His reputation, already ruined; his social standing, already at the bottom; his safety. He'd never really had it to begin with. The only thing he had left to lose was his self-respect, and that would only happen if he backed down now. The phrase kept running through his mind: Ikan Asin jadi naga, a salted fish becoming a dragon. That's what people would call an impossible transformation, something that could never happen. But David decided that he was going to make it happen anyway. From that moment on, David threw himself into the campaign with everything he had, and it wasn't easy, not even close. Ferry's people were everywhere, sabotaging his efforts at every turn. Posters torn down, supporters intimidated, lies spread about him through whisper campaigns. There were even moments when David feared for his physical safety, when cars would follow him home or strangers would appear outside his apartment. But something unexpected started happening. People started listening. Not the powerful people, not the wealthy people, but the ordinary people who'd been ignored and pushed aside just like David had been. They saw him standing up to Fairy, standing up to the system, and something sparked inside them. Hope, the dangerous, beautiful, terrifying possibility that things could actually change. Small groups started forming to support David. People volunteered to help with his campaign. Strangers would stop him on the street to tell him they were voting for him. For the first time in his life, David wasn't alone, and that girl he was fighting for, she became a symbol of why the fight mattered, not just for her, but for everyone who'd ever been powerless. As election day approached, the tension reached a breaking point. Ferry and his backers pulled out every dirty trick they had, but David kept fighting. The question that hung over everything was simple but profound. Could he actually do it? Could someone with nothing defeat someone with everything? Could David save the girl who looked like his mother? Could he overcome the chairman who controlled it all? This is a story that reminds us that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing what's right anyway. It's about believing that even when the odds are impossible, even when everyone tells you to give up, transformation is possible. Even a salted fish can become a dragon that shakes the heavens. And that's what makes this story unforgettable.